Welcome to Arash's World, where you will hear prominent voices, psychoanalysts, psychologists, therapists, philosophers, and thought leaders talk about a variety of mental health concerns and problems, including how to deal with anxiety, depression, and chronic conditions, and how to become more resilient, find inner peace, be emotionally engaged in your personal and professional life, and just be your beautiful, authentic self. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arash's World. Today we have a very special guest who's coming back to Arash's World. How are you doing, Michaela, Renee Johnson?
Doing pretty good this morning, and obviously the dog's got his whole own thing going on behind me here.
I can see that. That's awesome. Is that Wally? Is that
That's Walter. Yeah,
Oh,
that's Wally.
okay.
There he
Awesome.
is.
Okay, cool. How would you briefly describe or present yourself to our audience here? What would you say? And again, you can add things to it if you like, of what you've done over the past year as well.
Oh my gosh. I usually start by just saying I'm an ever learner of life. I'm always taking on new adventures and tackling new projects. I think that we have a lot of growth when we kind of step outside of our comfort zone. But on paper, I'm a licensed psychotherapist in quite a few states now. I'm also a commercial pilot who has my instrument rating, and my float rating is tailwheel endorsed, and recently completed the first ever aeronautical book tour, transcontinental in a warbird, coast to coast. It was quite the adventure. So
Oh my God. Yeah. So our last podcast was about stepping outside of the comfort zone, and you doing it, which is
I'm
amazing.
I'm walking that talk for sure.
Exactly.
Sometimes
Exactly.
questioning my sanity, but that's okay.
That's okay. That's what it's all about. So yeah, I saw a picture of the 1944 Stinson Reliant, and those are really cool planes.
Scarlett is a beautiful warbird. She has the classic gull wing, which the Stinson Reliants are kind of known for, and she's one of 25 that's left actively flying in the United States.
Mhm.
During the war, there were 500 plus of them, but they are a challenging airplane to fly, and so many of them did not make it.
Oh, okay, yeah, but you did, and she did here. That's awesome.
Yes, and there were some moments for sure during the
Oh,
tour where I was definitely, I experienced all the emotions that you can imagine in that 13 days for sure.
yeah, and that's like unheard of, right? To have an aerial book launch. So I applaud you for that. I mean, that's really awesome. And the book is, just to let everyone know, Seven Primal Wounds Break the Patterns Keeping You Stuck,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
And so, why flying, and how is that related to the primal wounds? And what would you say?
It's an interesting thing. To be honest, when I started looking at ways to really get the word out about the book, I kind of wanted to make this human connection component happen. I feel like in a world of technology and AI, we've really gotten away from sharing intimate stories with one another, and people are just really craving that connection. And I started to research, has anybody ever done an aeronautical book tour, and could not find a single one. The only thing that I did find was Halliburton's Flying Carpet, which was back in the 20s. And that was actually a book that was written after his tour. So I thought, well, why not load up the airplane with a bunch of books and go around the country and have people meet me at airports and just have small talk and conversation and visit and kind of share the concepts of the book and really be in connection. And it was amazing. The people that came out to meet me and bring me cookies and pumpkin muffins and candy and water. I mean, truly, and then just spending time on the ground, visiting with people and letting weather pass, and, having food together. It was just really an old fashioned, beautiful experience. And I'm so grateful that I did it. And truly, Scarlett draws a lot of attention at an airport, even if it hadn't been the book tour. So, people see this old vintage airplane that's been brought back to life, and they're like, wow, this is incredible. It's kind of like a remembrance in our human legacy, right? Of these olden days where things were a lot simpler than they are now.
And were there, and I have to ask, were there any scary moments? Because you've survived to tell the tale, which is amazing. And were there any scary moments like flying? I mean, I can imagine.
Yes, there were many. And notably, this airplane sat for 13 years in a hangar. I had just picked it up a couple of weeks before. I was originally intending to fly my Cub, Pop Tart, which had actually won an air race a couple of years before. So we bought Scarlett and found all the what pilots call squawks. So it's all the problems with the airplane. And a lot of those happened. I mean, the moment I started taxiing, I had an oil cable problem and oil started leaking all over my feet.
Oh my
Had to
God.
taxi her back in, have the mechanic change out an oil line. And then she vapor locked over the Donner Summit area, which is the Sierra Nevada mountains. So I had to do a cautionary landing instead, Reno stead. Then I was up against convective action and weather. And then I had to overfly the Rockies. And then I had a fuel line issue. So it definitely was the first
I
couple
think
of
that's a
days.
book in itself. I like to read that book
Yes.
too.
The first couple of days of the tour, truly, I was like, what have I done? Like, this is a terrible idea. And, you know, as I continued on and we're meeting people and just really seeing the support and just being a part of what everybody is experiencing right now in terms of overcoming challenges in life and kind of being like a walking example of that was really cool. And at some point, I really started to settle into the tour and just realize what an awesome opportunity and how exciting it really was. And that on some level, I was kind of holding my breath because I was like, I knew at any point anything could have stopped my forward momentum. So anything could have, you know, whether it was weather or mechanical failure, et cetera. And so I just really started to kind of have to live in the moment and be grateful that I'd made it as far as I had that day, you know, and embrace it and enjoy it. And then the next day was a new day and do it all over again. And then at some point I hit the halfway mark and I was on the way back home and I was like, okay, well, I got to go back home either way now. So, you know, and then when I hit the West Coast, and I've flown that terrain so much, and I've flown over those cities and those towns and that desert and all of that, I really started to kind of realize like, wow, this has been an epic adventure. And then when I landed, I kind of had like a full emotional dump, like,
Yeah.
wow, okay, this, you know, I did it.
Yeah, and in German would probably call like ideas like this Schnapsidee, which is kind of you can guess it's like it's moment of being drunk. He's like, oh yeah, I want to do this, right? But I'm so glad you did that. And I was in one of those planes, like just as a passenger, of course. But it was the weather did not look good, and it was like it was overcast, and the pilot decided we're just gonna fly back. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh my God. And he said, like, you know, I've got a daughter. I'm not gonna risk it. And I thought like of the dangers. We don't have that with commercial flights, but with these small planes, you never know. So good for you for doing that.
Yeah, you know, in the jumbo liners, they're often kind of cruising in the stratosphere, right? They're up in, you know, 20, 40,000 feet and they're getting kind of above all of the weather that we really experience down here. But they too can experience some weather troubles, especially on takeoff and landing. But in a small airplane like that, especially this airplane, it's really rated at this time for visual flight. So if I were to get into instrument conditions, it would not have been very good. So definitely there's this sense of get there-itis combined with stay alive-is.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Finding a balance in between, right? Those two things.
Yeah. And like, you know, you really have to make decisions on the fly, no pun intended, every day, every hour, every minute. You know, I mean, there were definitely times where there was unexpected weather and rising terrain. And do I turn back or do I just kind of keep going and see if the weather's improving? And those are kind of all what we call aeronautical decision making and really kind of have a big impact on successful outcomes.
And what I love is how this is related to your book, and you're using aviation as a metaphor for life. Let's talk about this a bit too.
Truly. And, you know, one of the things that I realized when I was doing work with couples and individuals is people just seem to be stuck in patterns, and in aviation, we call that being stuck in a holding pattern, right? You're kind of up there doing the thing.
Flying in
And
circles, basically, right?
yeah, exactly. And really not able to do anything or not knowing what to do next. And truly, there are a lot of metaphors with aviation and psychology or just life in general. Like going full throttle, for example, balls to the wall, right? That's a full throttle moment. Or throttling back or stuck on autopilot, all these different kind of
Oh, I
analogies that
love
we
that.
use.
Yes, yes.
And
Most of us are stuck on autopilot, and we don't even
truly,
realize there are other options out there.
truly,
Right.
James Clear wrote a great book called Atomic Habits. And, what your autopilot is doing matters. And I realized that people were definitely stuck in these patterns that were not serving them at all, and started diving into Eric Berne's transactional analysis, which is parts of self that we get stuck in, really looking at Ainsworth and Bowlby's work on attachment. And I started to realize that we formulate these narratives, these core beliefs, these primal wounds when we're young. And
Yes.
in our teen years, what was a not good enough narrative in childhood becomes, I'm never going to be good enough. And then as an adult, we paradoxically pick people and situations that remind us or affirm that belief because it's comfortable. And learning that is driving your car on some level, right? Your internal combustion system is being driven by this kind of a warning system that's constantly going off. And learning how to rewire that to make rational decisions when activated or faced with some kind of threat or decision-making process, like, am I making this decision from my self-aware adult, or am I making this decision from the part of me that's afraid of getting burned, right? Or dying. And so when I started to help people unpack these wounds, I started to realize people aren't broken at all. They're actually working really well. Like too well, you know what I mean? Like, let's lean the mixture just a little bit because we're running a little hot,
Let's
kind
add
of a
some
thing.
craziness to it, right? And I think it's really important. Someone who keeps repeating the same mistakes over and over again until, like when you kind of realize I don't have to do this the same way again, or I have a choice. I think that's something we don't realize often. And it's again not our fault. It's just we can't see it because these are our hidden beliefs, as you say. So they're in the unconscious. So how can we make them conscious? What would you say would be a good strategy for that?
Well, what I encourage for people to do is to start by recognizing the next time you're activated. So when you get fired up, you'll feel it in your body first. Your body's going to give you all the red flag warning signs. Your jaw's going to tense, your heart's going to beat a
Yeah.
little faster, you're going to get sweaty, all those things that you do when you're feeling activated by something. And then ask yourself, what's underneath it right now? A lot of times people say, "Oh, I'm just ticked off because of blah, blah, blah." And I said, well, that's great. Go deeper. What's
Yeah,
underneath it?
exactly.
And
Yes.
usually underneath it, you will find it's, I don't matter. I don't belong.
Yeah.
I'm not good enough. I'm incapable or not smart enough. And once you start to recognize what's underneath it, that's how you can rewire it. So then you can say, okay, so the story that I'm telling myself is that I'm not smart enough to figure this out. Now I can look at that from a rational standpoint and make some decisions about that. Maybe I'm not smart enough to figure that out. That's okay. What do I need to do to change that? Right. Or
Yeah.
maybe I am smart enough to figure it out and I'm just having a woe is me child moment, right? Where I'm throwing a little temper tantrum with myself.
Oh, yeah.
And so then I encourage people to start to look into which primal responder is showing up. Because typically when we get activated, almost immediately we'll go into a part of self. And it's either our child responder, who's very teary, victim mindset, woe was me, guarded, temper tantrumy. It's our teenager who's the justice warrior, gets really ticked off and sends that text we didn't mean to send. Or it's our parent, which is very judgmental and critical. You should have known better. Can't believe you did that again. You knew better than that. Very condescending. And once you identify the primal responder that you constantly have showing up, then you can also change how you respond to the environment as well. So you can say, ooh, you know what? I'm probably not going to fire off that text from my teenager. I'm probably going to just take a pause, get right with myself, and then think logically about this and then respond once I have my self-aware adult on board.
And that's when you can break the pattern. And it does take like realization, self-awareness, I think, but also sometimes the courage because you feel uncomfortable about it of changing routines. Like even like going to the gym for me, the first time it's like, oh my God, I really don't want to be here, but I am here. Like what do I do next? Right. And it's become a habit, right? And even if it's uncomfortable, it's like we do have to go that path. And it takes a certain amount of courage to do that too.
Totally. And I found that what happens is people get upset with themselves about that. And these are hot stove moments in our life where we've been burned by something and we don't need to be angry at the stove,
Mhm.
right? Like we don't need to be so upset about it. We just
Yeah.
have to learn how to react or respond to it a little bit differently. And it doesn't mean that anything's wrong. It just means that we need to approach it a little bit with maybe some caution.
And it's very common, and like nobody's really immune from this because I just recently watched the John Candy, the famous comedian, his the documentary about him, and
Yeah.
he was suffering from lack of like self-worth and doubt in himself. And he had made it. He was a superstar, and he had all the money he wanted, but it was just this childhood experience of when he was 5 years old on his birthday, his dad had a heart attack and died, and he never really dealt with this, I think. And so it's like it continued on. So it doesn't matter. You can be rich and famous and all that. They also have these demons, internal demons that they have to face in many ways.
If I were to look at John Candy's primal wound, I would say that sort of moment that you described probably set him on a trajectory of the powerless primal wound.
Yeah.
There are 7 of them, but often when I see something where a parent was ill or passed away, or a sibling was ill or passed away, they usually end up with a powerless primal wound.
Mhm.
And so if that was his narrative, then, throughout his life, he would feel like everybody else was. In charge and he was just kind of following the leader, and that he wasn't empowered over his life. And I know he struggled with weight loss, so he probably had some narrative there about that, like I'm not empowered over my life to be able to get my weight in check, that sort of a thing.
And the fear of losing someone you love suddenly, right, without explanation. And that is a huge trauma of like, like anybody could like his dad could just disappear out of life. And I think that is part of life, but we can't live in fear. We can't live in survival mode. We have to really like I like the analogy of the car you say. We have to be driving the car. And if we need to
Yeah.
take lessons, we'll take lessons. If we need to practice,
Right.
we practice, right? If there are
Right.
red lights, okay, we need to stop, but it's not going to stay red. We just have to wait and then go at the right moment and so on. So there's a lot that
That's
that
right.
we can do. Mhm.
And the primal wound, if you're driving the car, right, and you're letting the primal wound dictate where you're going, you're either going to end up in a really beautiful place down at a national park with a great vista, or you're going to end up in a seedy alley with that you don't want to be in, where your tires are going to get taken, right? So it's really identifying what information is beneficial and what information needs to be kind of put in the back seat.
Oh yeah, I like that. That too. Awesome. Yeah, that's true. And so you're basing your information on insights. So you've been a counselor yourself for many years, 15 years, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
15 years that I've been identifying these patterns. And this is the framework is the core of my doctoral research. So really spent 3 years diving into these concepts specifically and coming up with the framework that is primal wounding.
And I love that because you're still working with this stuff. You're not just like, okay, I'm done. I did my hours. Okay, now I'm gonna relax. Like, no, what can I find out here? What does it tell me, right? The data that you have and the personal like connections that you have. And I think that's really cool. But you also blend it with neuroscience as well. And like how does that come into play too?
Well, a lot of people are familiar with things like the love languages or the 4 horsemen behaviors we fall into, like stonewalling, et cetera. And
Right.
so with primal wounding, what's really nice is that it all incorporates so well. So people know terms these days like, oh, I'm an anxious attached, or I'm an avoidant personality, right? And so when you can kind of look at the reason you're avoidant as you've just been activated in your primal wound, then you can even incorporate, well, what's the love language that I need to provide to myself to do a repair? And so a lot of these different frameworks that people are familiar with can really be added on to by understanding the primal wound. And that's where it's really playing out nicely in the work that I'm doing with couples, because there's so much here to unpack. And once they know it, they disempower it so easily. So the partner says, hey, you forgot to take out the trash. And they instantly feel that upset. And then they go, oh, you know what? The story I'm telling myself is that because I forgot to take out the trash, I'm not good enough. And that doesn't feel good to me. Or, you know, partner, when you didn't come home at the time you said you were going to, I told myself that I'm not being chosen or I don't matter. Right. And we start to disempower. And what bothers one person doesn't necessarily bother the other person. Right. So if you're a powerless primal wound and you feel like things are happening to you, or you're a not smart enough primal wound and your partner says, well, why can't you figure this out? This isn't that hard. Right.
Yeah.
You're going to be activated by that way more than somebody who's got the undeserving primal wound. They're not going to be bothered by that. If you say that same phrasing to them, no big deal. But if you say it to somebody who feels like they're not smart enough and that's their wound, they're going to fly off the handle quick.
Yeah, and we're reactive and we're on the defensive often. And it's like, it's never about the trash or the dishes and so on. There's always like a context, a subtext to it, right? And I think that's really to uncover that. And by like kind of pausing, like you said, and just kind of realizing, okay, like how do I respond to this? Then we change not only our own narrative, but the whole relationship. Because suddenly I'm not responding to that in the way that the other person is expecting me to do. And now I'm changing the whole situation. And that gives us real power of not only over ourselves, but over others and over relationships we have with others.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You've nailed it. And you know, what I'll tell my couples is you can go ahead and talk all you want in sessions, but what I'm listening for is not the content. It's not about that, like you said, the trash or whatever. It's about these patterns that are underneath it. And the empowerment does come from being able to recognize it and do something different, or invite your partner or your boss or your mom or whoever you're in a relationship with into the process of like, hey, this is what would really help me out. When I'm in this type of situation, I really prefer to be spoken to like this, or I really prefer to have this sort of time to kind of process. You know, you can start to really lead these relationships that you're in rather than finding yourself on your back foot.
Do you find it's better to work with the couple individually first and then put them together, or because they could be more complicated when both of them are there and trying to manage them? What's your approach in that sense?
You know, I've been doing it for so long that I see a lot faster when they're together, because I can see how quickly they fire each other off. And I'm just so programmed to look for those things. But the work that I do individually does usually come in the context of the individual sessions. And, you know, I have a lot of people that come to me because they're stuck in career choices or something with their job. And I start to identify the ways in which that primal wound is holding them back, or it's causing problems and rifts at work because of the way that they're showing up, or they're getting really upset when somebody's getting, you know, maybe a promotion and they're not, or somebody is not carrying their weight and they're being left with all the work. That's a big one for the powerless wounders. Like, oh, well, I just have to do all the work because nobody else is gonna, you know, that kind of
Exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so with all this wealth of information and data that you have, do you see any patterns or any changes that you say, like more recently, people fight over things than other things now than they used to maybe 10, 15 years ago? Do you see certain patterns evolve there? And what would you share with us if you found any?
You know, I would say that mostly people are the same underneath it all. They just want to be supported and loved. And again, there are some shifts in terms of maybe what's going on in the world and things like that, or different belief systems politically or medically or whatever. But really, if you can speak to the people that you're in relationship with, whether it's your partner or your mom or your brother or your boss, in a way that they can receive it, and you can be validated and acknowledged. And by the way, you can validate and acknowledge someone without agreeing. I always have to tell people that, right? Like I can say, hey, that's really interesting that you see the sky is purple. I think it's actually orange. Tell me about that, right? Like I don't have to agree with your purple idea.
And we don't have to be right all the time, or we don't have to convince the other person that we are right, even if we are, or maybe we aren't, right? It's that kind of also humility too, of seeing things differently.
And I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed is the shift in when people are coming in now is this, if I'm not acknowledged for being right, then everything is falling apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's a
so
life or
my
death
way or the
situation,
highway,
right?
right?
Yeah.
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 And that's
Yeah.
the biggest thing that I've been seeing more than anything is that it's kind of like a rigidity in belief
Right.
systems or and that's where communicating and how we talk. I have a framework within the book called Talk Tactics, which teaches people really how to communicate in a way that's more graceful, more respectful, more empowering for everybody, right? Like I teach people that we don't have to say I'm sorry. That's actually a big cop out. We don't have to apologize for our opinions and beliefs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes we overdo it. I find too. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Okay, well, why? Why do you say sorry, right? And I tell
Right.
people, don't say sorry. Like, don't be
Yes.
sorry
And
about it.
instead say thank you for understanding,
Yeah.
right? Or whatever.
And that's empowering too, because when we move from that rigidity and we become more flexible, it is empowering because we feel like we're more in charge. We're not being driven by this car of rigidity, right? And we're
Right.
stepping out of the car, maybe even.
Right, absolutely. And you know that we're bound to hit potholes. We're bound to have moments where we did not show up as gracefully as we would like, or circumstances and things happen to us that maybe we find challenging or we don't respond to very well. And that's okay because it's all filed in the system, right? So we can start to kind of break it down and look at it and go, okay, well, what went well and what didn't go well? And then we can show up differently next time from what pilots call debriefing the flight, right? So we can look at those moments too. And I find that people learn a lot more from the times that they reacted less gracefully than the times where they reacted well.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, and I have various people who are counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists who write books. And so is writing, and we mentioned this in our last podcast, is this a form of therapy for you yourself as well?
Huge, 100%. I would say most of the books that I've written for me first.
That's good. Yeah. And it resonates with people because it is, something of importance. Yeah.
This one, it's kind of funny. It actually started as a book that I was tentatively titled "Give Up Already,"
Okay.
and then it became "Get Naked," which was like strip back all the things and start to really look at yourself from a vulnerable place. And then it ended up as the name of the framework for 7 Primal Wounds. But it's kind of funny how it morphed over the years. When it started as "Give Up Already," that was 8-9 years ago. And it kind of like morphed over time.
Yeah, no, I kind of wish, like, not to give up part, but the let's get naked. Maybe if you could have included that, let's get naked and break the patterns, right?
Yeah.
That would be
And
really
you
cool.
know, there is a chapter titled that, but there's so
Okay.
many people that, in the publishing team that looked at censorship and all the algorithm
Oh,
stuff and how it'd
oh
be
no.
flagged or placed in the wrong category. You know, they do all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah, of
it
course.
was an executive decision that I did not take lightly, though. I struggled with that for a minute.
Okay, good for you. Good, we have fought for that. That's awesome. And yeah, so again, thank you so much for being here, Michaela. Your book is 7 Primal Wounds. Break the patterns keeping you stuck. Awesome conversation. Love the aerial book launch. That was never done before. So that's awesome. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me. I love when we visit, and I hope you get some rest from all the work you've been doing as well.